Thank you so much. It is September 21st, 2022, and this meeting of the Seattle City Council's Public Assets and Homelessness Committee will come to order. It is 2:01 p.m. I'm Andrew Lewis, chair of the committee. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Councilmember Herbold.
Here.
Councilmember Morales.
Here.
Vice Chair Mosqueda.
Present.
Chair Lewis.
Present.
Chair, there are 4 members present.
Thank you. And Council President Juarez did inform me that she would not be able to attend the meeting today, and she is excused from the meeting. Approval of the agenda. If there's no objection, the agenda will be adopted. Hearing no objection, the agenda is adopted. Chair's report. We have a fairly short agenda today, so I'm just going to go ahead and move us along to public comment. We'll be considering Resolution 32067, which we initially discussed 2 weeks ago, and that is our only agenda item. So we'll move on to the public comment. The clerk will moderate the public comment period. Mr. Clerk, how many people are signed up for public comment, virtually and in person?
We have 2 people signed up for virtual public comment. One is listed as present, and we have 2 in-person public commenters.
Okay, we will start with the entire in-person list. We will set speaking time for 2 minutes, and then we will do the entire online list. So as notice to those signed in online, if you're signed up but not present, you're on deck because we'll go with the in-person folks first. So Mr. Clerk, you may proceed with the public comment period.
Our first in-person public commenter is Marguerite Richard, followed by Alex Zimmerman.
Yes, my name is Marguerite Richard, and I usually talk about anything that I want to say. So yeah, I'm concerned about this is the Committee for Homelessness and Public Assets. And you also have, bless you, there's something on there that talks about improving 3rd Avenue. So I walk up and down 3rd Avenue, and I don't like what I've seen because of the fact that we had something that was race-baited when Jenny Durkin was leading. It was called Chop Chaz and the murder of George Floyd. I'm saying it because I don't know what's going to tear up the city again, because that same type of formality is still going on. Racism and discrimination. My friend was killed because of it. Honorable Michael B. Fuller, you saw him a lot. So do we have to change the script to fit your need or ours? Because we're people too. We're human too. And I just don't understand. None of you have stepped to the plate to tell me, oh, well, this is how we do it, so that we can understand what you're doing to kill off people. And it's important to me that I continue to live and fulfill my mission on this earth. I don't come down here for no fuddy-duddy business. I was here yesterday. I heard those people from the Chinatown. That's what I knew when my uncle had a record store on Jackson Street before it was even the International District. Are they people too? I don't know where all this suffering is coming from. I don't like it. And you know what I told Richard Conlon? If you don't want to do right, you can walk your dog and work in your garden. Because this business is people business and saving lives. Yeah, time expired.
Our next public commenter is Alex Zimmerman.
Oh, where is my face? No faces more? Sieg Heil, Emerald, Flower, Goodwill, them Nazi Gestapo bandita and killer. My name is Alex Zimmerman. I'm president of Stand Up America. 3rd Avenue, fix it is very good. We need fix it 3rd Avenue so more homeless people come to 3rd Avenue and feel happy. It's exactly what is we need fix it 3rd Avenue. We need to spend $1 million and $1 million for park, for Third Avenue, so homeless can come and be happy. But yesterday, a big meeting from China people, you know what it means, show we have in big problem right now with homeless. What is you freaking bandita killer in Nazi rats? You know what it means? Cannot fix it homeless problem for how many years? I live here 35 years. You cannot fix it. New council comes, same rats, Nazi garbage rats. Another council come, another garbage rats. And never stopping this. Fix it homeless, very simple. I have proposition in talking about this to my election, to everybody. We can fix this very easy. You have 25,000 empty apartments in city every year, one by one, one by one. You don't do nothing. You guys are very dangerous people because by definition, we need change you next year totally because you are a real killer, a real cretina. Is this exactly who you are? You cannot fix it. One problem for so many years. Who are you? You are absolutely sick, psychopath, Nazi, Gestapo, fascist, with
Your time has expired.
Them Nazi principle. Yeah, time for finish now. I am good.
Our first online public commenter is Alicia Ruiz. Alicia, I don't see you listed as present. Please call in if you're listening. Our next online public commenter is John Grant. John, I'm going to unmute you and you can begin speaking whenever you're ready. Please press *6.
John, we can't hear you. You may need to hit *6.
Thank you, Chair Lewis and members of the committee. My name is John Grant, and I am the Chief Strategy Officer for the Low Income Housing Institute. I am testifying today in favor of Councilmember Lewis's resolution in support of the Downtown Seattle Association's Third Avenue Vision Plan. This plan and more is desperately needed to address ongoing public safety concerns for this area of downtown. Tragically, on August 2nd, a man was brutally and violently beaten to death in Pike, and he was a resident of Lehigh's Hotel on 3rd Avenue. He was Rodney Peterman, a senior citizen who had only recently moved in. We have 35 residents living at the Glen Hotel who live in fear every day with the violence happening in front of their home. The conditions on 3rd Avenue are intolerable for our residents, many who are previously homeless, frail, and living with disabilities. 3rd Avenue is not safe for our residents, the nearby businesses, and staff and patrons of our immediate neighbor, the restaurant Wild Ginger. Today, Lehigh has lost 2 commercial tenants, most recently the Steak and Shake. Death of our resident, Rodney Peterman, could have been prevented. We hope we can work with the city on a solution to quickly transform 3rd Avenue. Lehigh has offered to host a public safety space at our Glen Hotel using our vacant storefront, possibly to create a street-level community police precinct for community service officers. For these reasons and more, we support the 3rd Avenue Vision Plan and call on the city to take immediate action to address ongoing public safety concerns. Thank you for your time.
Mr. Chair, I still see that Alicia Ruiz is not present. We have no present public commenters.
Thank you. And Alicia, sorry you couldn't join us this afternoon, but do please send written comment. And sorry we weren't able to connect. Okay, we will then proceed to today's agenda and close the public comment period. Mr. Clerk, will you please read item number 1 on the agenda into the record?
Item 1, Resolution 32067, a resolution endorsing the goals of the Downtown Seattle Association's 3rd Avenue Vision and stating the intent of the City of Seattle to work collaboratively with the Downtown Seattle Association, King County Metro, and Sound Transit to pursue improvements to 3rd Avenue in downtown Seattle.
Thank you so much. So we first heard this resolution at the September 7th meeting of this committee and held off on a vote on that day to give committee members the opportunity to review the materials and the conversations that we had in that session. So we do have a couple of amendments to consider today. The first is a substitute amendment I'm bringing forward in consultation with various executive departments that we're requesting work product from under the resolution, and make some of those commitments more clear, particularly to analyze transit volume projections for downtown Seattle coming out of the pandemic, and conduct retail and return to office studies for downtown and evaluate funding opportunities for some of that work. And the second amendment is being brought by my colleague, Councilmember Herbold, and so we will consider those in turn. But first, I want to get the resolution in front of us so we can take action on it. So I will move resolution 32067.
Second.
And that has been moved and seconded. So we will now proceed to these resolutions. So I move to amend, or these amendments to the resolution. So first, I'm going to put the substitute version in front of the committee that reflects just a little bit more refinement to the things we were requesting from the executive a couple of weeks ago. I'd consider it to be largely technical in nature. And so I'll move to amend resolution 32067 by substituting version 2A for version 1B. Is there a second?
Second.
Been moved and seconded. So will the clerk please, well, first I'm going to make an opening here if any colleagues want to comment on the motion before the committee, which is to pass the amendment. Hearing and seeing no comments, will the clerk please call the roll on the adoption of the substitute bill resolution?
Councilmember Herbold,
Yes.
Councilmember Morales,
Yes.
Vice Chair Mosqueda,
Aye.
Chair Lewis.
Yes.
Chair, there are 4 votes in favor, none opposed.
Thank you. The motion to amend and substitute the substitute resolution has passed and is carried. Are there any further comments? Well, first, we'll have to consider other amendments from the floor, but I guess that's part of asking for additional comments on the amended resolution. Are there any colleagues seeking to be recognized? Councilmember Herbold.
Thank you so much. Appreciate the opportunity to offer Amendment 2 to the resolution. The Amendment 2 addresses some of the issues that I raised during the first committee discussion of the resolution. Wanted to add some detail about the interest in ensuring as we go forward planning that we're maintaining transit capacity, and a little bit about what that means. This amendment does so and mentions meeting ridership and travel time demands. I asked the DSA what they thought of the draft version. They suggested some additions which are included, and I thank them for working with my office.
Thank you. And as those comments do indicate, this is a friendly amendment to the resolution that I will be supporting today, and certainly encourage committee members to support it. Are there any, one, I will second, therefore, Councilmember Herbold's amendment. As it's moved and seconded, are there any additional comments on Amendment 2?
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Councilmember Morales.
thank you. Maybe this is a process question. I do see that Mr. Helmbrecht is here. So are you anticipating having him speak to this or answer questions, or are you just moving through the amendments?
I thought we would get the final resolution in front of us and then
Okay.
And then answer questions, since these are fairly non-controversial amendments, so we can have a discussion. I guess we should have done that at the front of the entire process, but they're fairly technical amendments.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so will the clerk please call the roll on Amendment 2?
Councilmember Herbold,
Yes.
Councilmember Morales,
Yes.
Vice Chair Mosqueda,
Aye.
Chair Lewis.
Yes.
Chair, there are 4 votes in favor, none opposed.
Thank you. And with that, Amendment 2 is incorporated into the underlying resolution. So with that, why don't we go ahead and have a presentation from Council Central staff and the mayor's office on the resolution that has now been amended and substituted before we deliberate on recommending final passage to full council. So we have with us from the Seattle Mayor's Office, Elliot Helmbrecht, along with Lish Whitson and Calvin Chow from our Council Central staff. How would you guys like to organize the discussion on the amended resolution before us? Should we start with Elliot or should we start with Central staff?
I'm happy to kick things off and speak to the substitute version if that's okay.
Okay, thank you, Elliot.
Yep. So for folks who don't know me, my name is Elliot Helmbrecht. My pronouns are he, him, and I work as a transportation policy advisor in the mayor's office. Thank you for inviting me to your committee today. You all had a pretty robust discussion a few weeks ago about the resolution in front of you, so I'll sort of skip to my comments related to the substitute version. Our office is in support of the intent both in the DSA's vision report and the resolution as it was presented 2 weeks ago. We know that there are a lot of reasons for the conditions on Third that we see today. So the substitute version in front of you clarifies that there are multiple factors similar to the report itself, creating the conditions out there. And then like Councilmember Lewis mentioned, gets a little technical about what the proposed next steps would be. So as proposed next steps, we made some edits really along the lines of doing some additional homework before we would advance this project to going down the design pathway. So going back to your committee, you all raised similar questions that we have around sort of the future of work, the future of transportation, and who's passing through and to downtown Seattle. So before we advance down the design pathway, this resolution, the substitute version in front of you, recommends some additional traffic analysis as a first next step. Going back to 2019, when the vision report was put together, we were actually going to be going down a similar path of doing some additional traffic analysis and looking at updated trends. COVID unfortunately put that all on hold, but it's a sign of progress that we're picking it back up. But we need to go back to the chalkboard and do some additional homework here. We also would want to vet that additional traffic analysis by the scenarios in the vision report itself. So do updated analysis make sense with the vision from 2019, or do we want to consider more options? I think we would also want to work with the DSA on return to work trends and what the future workforce needs are in downtown and incorporate that into what would eventually become a design concept for the Third Ave corridor. And then in essence, in honor of one of our transportation equity strategies too, we would owe going back to the community with that updated analysis, how that compares to the scenarios in the vision report, and vetting and talking to them about those updates as well. So again, sort of largely technical in nature, these amendments support the intent and the spirit that Councilmember Lewis put forward in front of you, and just gets a little bit more detailed than what those proposed next steps would be. I really thank Councilmember Lewis, John Scholes at the DSA, and all of you for re-engaging in this conversation and sparking it again, because I think it really is kind of a sign of progress and looking forward, which I know we've wanted to do for a few years now. So with that, I might either open it up to Lish or Cal or questions.
Elliot, thank you. The only thing I'll take issue with is I highly doubt the mayor's office has a chalkboard. But if you guys do, that's great. Maybe that's a budget item to flag for Council Budget Chair Mosqueda, who's in the committee. Love chalkboards.
Yep, can confirm it's whiteboards, yeah.
with that, why don't we go ahead and move on to Lish and Cal.
You know, we don't have a lot to add, but we're available if there are questions.
Thank you. So do colleagues have questions for the panel? Councilmember Morales.
Thank you. I first want to thank Central staff for helping me think through this and answer some questions over the last couple of weeks. And Elliot, thank you for being here. I do still have, I think, just some sort of basic questions that I'm hoping you can answer. Clearly, we know that mobility and travel kind of to and through downtown is very different now, post-COVID. And I share the concern about the sort of lack of joy in the public realm right now. There's a lot of reasons why downtown is looking the way it does. We certainly need to create space that everyone can enjoy, and especially the kind of space that is safe for folks who are walking or biking or taking transit downtown. It would be helpful for me to try to understand some of the principles that are guiding this. And I will say that there are two areas of concern that I have. One is cost. The several alternatives are proposed, including, so we have the existing conditions with the size of the sidewalks, several different alternatives that consider expansion of those, but also things that would require curb changes, signal timing, intersections. And there's not a lot of information about when or how a capital request might be coming. Given the deficit we're facing, the hard decisions we're going to have to be making, not just in this budget cycle, but for the next couple of years, I am a little concerned about that. And frankly, also thinking about the fact that we have some neighborhoods in the city that lack basic amenities. So I would like to hear a little bit about how you kind of are thinking about, or what principles we should be using to guide decisions about how to invest. That's kind of one area of question. And then the other question is really about inclusion. So, in reading through the longer report and looking at who was involved in the task force, I'd be interested to know, the summary and the resolution says that hundreds of stakeholders were involved, but given the long history in this area as a hub for poor people to gather, I'm surprised that I don't see organizations that are representing social service providers. Given that this is a major transit corridor, I'm surprised I don't see organizations representing transit riders. So I want to know that if as we're continuing these conversations, which I do think are important, how downtown adapts given the future of work. We're interested in learning how downtown can be more inclusive, how it can be safer, but also how it can promote prosperity for everybody, not just for downtown property owners. And so the last thing I guess I'll say is, I'm also interested to know what kind of conversations you're having as it relates to the plan for a second tunnel through downtown as we move toward ST3. So those are my questions and concerns about how we move forward in this conversation.
Thank you. Those are excellent questions that I have some answers to, but I want to turn it over maybe first to Elliot, and then maybe there could be technical answers too from Lish and Calvin in terms of the timing of potential report backs. But I think Elliot kind of holds the key to many of those questions because it would go to executive implementation. So Elliot, why don't you go first?
Yep, happy to. And those are excellent questions, Council Member. You asked first about sort of our guiding principles, and I wanted to restate sort of the Third Avenue really is the backbone of our transit network. And while we all recognize that improvements to the public realm need to be made too, a guiding principle we have, and why we're really supportive of Councilmember Herbold's amendment too, is maintaining transit capacity in that corridor as a key part of the conversation moving forward. Your questions about sort of how you then factor in cost and design changes like curb changes, those are all questions that would, or answers that would come out of further design process. And you would talk about that with community. At this point in time, I think we have to go back and do a traffic analysis and really figure out, given updates to Sound Transit Link Light Rail expansion, given our own projects in the corridor and rapid ride improvements, future Sound Transit expansion, how many riders need to use this corridor, need to get through the system? How is that changing? Because that really will impact what the design looks like and what our options are. And at that point, then you can kind of talk to community about trade-offs around cost, what's available, and what we can do in that space. And I think having that conversation about Third Avenue while the city is also talking to communities across the city about the updated Seattle transportation plan, future funding sources, both federal and local and state, we'll be able to use updated information about Third and fold it into larger city conversations about priorities. Where does that rank, and what can we do with resources available? But without that level of information, without kind of getting a sense of where community is at, and that does, I agree, that it should include people who are traveling through the corridor, not just, have a business here, who not just are situated here, but really transit riders themselves, the social services that you mentioned. I think the DSA did a great job in putting the vision together, but we do need to make sure that's inclusive outreach. But without that information around a preferred community concept for the corridor, it'd be hard to have those citywide prioritization conversations, which is why we support advancing this conversation and the work behind it. And so I think that kind of answers your question too about the second tunnel. We would want to be looking at not just what's planned or what's been changed since 2019, but also what's coming online in the future and incorporating that into this work as well.
And Calvin or Lish, did you have anything to add? Calvin?
I think I would just add, kind of along Elliot's lines, that there is a little bit of a sort of timing deadline to think about the levy renewal, because that's when sort of all the transit funding will be, or transportation funding in general will be considered in terms of what we might go back to the voters for towards the end of 2024. So that does put a bit of a sort of an outer time limit of when this work has to get done to inform that discussion.
Yeah, a couple more things I would say, and then of course I want to give Councilmember Morales an opportunity to follow up on her lines of questioning, which are great questions. I think you guys did a good job of covering sort of the cost and timelines around cost investments. I do really want to acknowledge the point Councilmember Morales makes that I'm certainly reminded of every time I'm on Third Avenue, that Third Avenue has historically been a large regional gathering place, and in a lot of cases for a lot of our neighbors who are experiencing significant public health challenges or maybe in and out of a state of homelessness or chronically homeless. And the planning that we're making has to be cognizant of that. It also has to be cognizant of the fact that a lot of the people who live in the core of Third Avenue do live in housing that is owned by service providers. And we had public comment today from John Grant with the Low Income Housing Institute that is supporting this resolution. A resident of their building that is on Third Avenue was beaten to death in early August due to the conditions that have been persisting there. And I've appreciated Lehigh's partnership in this to be part of the solution of making it a safe environment for their residents who live there, most of whom have been placed in that housing after experiencing homelessness for a prolonged period of time. And I'm also reminded that a couple weeks after I took office in 2020, there was a shooting on Third Avenue where the victim who died was a resident of the Bellwether building that is located on Third Avenue near the McDonald's that's there. So it is something to be conscious of, that as we're making these improvements, that the people who actually live on Third Avenue, in Bellwether, Lehigh, other housing that's available there, in many cases are some of the most people in our community who are not given spaces that are adequately invested in to live. And I do think part of improving the conditions and the livability and the urban environment of Third Avenue, it should be a relevant consideration that we involve the Low Income Housing Institute and Bellwether to make sure that it is a livable environment that is adequately invested in. Because I would actually argue, I don't think that historically the city or King County has made commensurate investments with how we use that space. And we discussed that extensively in the last committee meeting, that by using it as a regular transit corridor, we've sort of ignored other things where the people who use it as a neighborhood don't have the kind of amenities other neighborhoods have. So given those considerations, I think that certainly as we go forward, what I hope, and maybe Elliot could comment on this too, but part of the reason to manifest this in a resolution has just been that a lot of this work product is something we need executive help and support to assemble and build to move forward. It's not something we're really set up for as a council. I'm sure Calvin and Lish would agree that a lot of this heavy lifting can put a large undue burden on central staff if not supported by executive departments. And I would hope, and maybe Elliot, you could confirm this, that the process that we convene around this is going to be inclusive of a lot of those voices who may not have been as extensively included in the initial Third Avenue visioning, but who certainly, as now it becomes a public process that we are running, we should make sure are intimately engaged in this, and the multifaceted nature of this discussion that doesn't just have implications for transportation, but also, the economic viability of the neighborhood and the uses and the amenities. But maybe Elliot, I could turn it over to you to confirm that in your process, that'll be part of being inclusive to make sure those voices are involved, because that is my expectation.
Definitely. That's a commitment we have for all of our projects, and a process improvement we're trying to make across the board. Commitment to inclusive outreach is inherent in everything we're doing now. We can always do better, and I would look to all of you to inform us on, are there particular groups that you would like to see invited that maybe aren't on the list? So a partnership moving forward on that, but a commitment for sure.
And then part of the accountability there is, when there's committee report backs, I'm sure the executive is well aware you're going to be pushed on that if it's not living up to the commitment. But I think it will. So I really appreciate those answers. Councilmember Mosqueda.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks for the presentation on this. I also want to thank the folks at the Urbanist for the pretty comprehensive write-up about the long history that we have with wanting to activate the space along Third Avenue and really turn it into a bike, pedestrian, transit commuter friendly corridor. That was a good piece for orientation. Mr. Chair, I have 3 questions, if you don't mind. Can I take them one at a time?
Of course.
Thanks so much. So the first question builds on what Councilmember Morales was noting as vice chair regarding the cost. We have taken the action to substitute the legislation, but is there a fiscal note associated with the substitute bill? I hear the mayor's office being supportive of the substitute. Does that mean that you already have the funding baked into your base budget as being proposed in the upcoming budget to absorb the cost and the impacts of the substitute bill?
Elliot, you want to start on that?
I would just say that we are actively finalizing the budget that's going to be sent to council very shortly here too. So we are looking at ways to support this work moving forward.
Do you have a cost assessment of how much higher the impact would be under the substitute, since I don't see as associated fiscal note?
I would say that there isn't a difference between, I looked at what we were proposing in the substitute for the cost of that work. I didn't compare it to the estimated cost of the original.
Does central staff have any thoughts on that?
So my read of the substitute is that it's really drilling down and being more specific about the specific actions that need to be taken to move the project forward, that it's in line with what the original draft of the resolution said, but that it's more detail and more specific commitments from the executive to actually move this this work forward. But we do not have an estimate of costs at this point.
Lish, could I maybe put a little more context in here? I think we're sort of being we're being unfair to poor Elliot in the sense that we're kind of asking him to tip the mayor's hand on his budget before he's announcing it in the next couple of days. And what I would just say is, and this is just me speculating, and Elliot doesn't have to respond to this, but I would imagine that the amendments my office worked on with the mayor's office probably reflect their expectations of what is going to be proposed in the mayor's budget. And I might ask that since the final vote on this would be next Tuesday, we be in a position, we'll probably have the information by then to reconcile Councilmember Mosqueda's question. But I would imagine the context of the outreach over the last 2 weeks from the mayor's office on wanting to seek certain technical changes and adjustments is probably related to trying to sync this policy with their the budget implications of what they would like to do in partnership with us. And that might be the best place to leave it for now till next Tuesday, when we will have, when all that information will be public, given the announcement coming on the budget. And Councilmember Herbold, did you have a point on that too?
Yeah, just to, I think, make, in my mind, not criticizing your articulation at all, but just trying to cut to the chase here. I think, Elliot, what we need is just simply an updated fiscal note for Tuesday's vote. Is that possible?
I see Cal put his hand up, but I'd be happy to work with you all on sort of putting some rough estimates together and figuring out if that looks like a fiscal note or if that's updated information on the cost estimate. Happy to keep working with you and to get your questions answered.
Yeah, I mean, we could just amend the bill on Tuesday afternoon with the new fiscal note that reflects the costs to do the process associated with this resolution. Just to replace the fiscal note that we have in place that's based on the old version.
Yep. And Cal, do you have a bit more context to Councilmember Mosqueda's first question?
Well, I just wanted to add that the substitute version, it's definitely more descriptive in terms of work product. So the executive has a much better understanding of what the costs actually are. I think at the initial submission of the bill was more focused on getting the principle out there and asking the executive to continue to work on this piece. So now we actually have a more defined series of steps, including some very specific actions that weren't contemplated before, such as the assessment of commuter change behavior. So I think we can work on getting a better cost estimate for you of what these sort of planning costs are. And just reiterate that doesn't cover any sort of recommendations that might come out of this effort, which would have to be considered once we know what those are.
Great, thanks so much. I just want us to make sure that we're getting into the habit of having updated fiscal notes with substitute legislation or amended legislation before final passage. Mr. Chair, my second question, I want to make sure that I frame this in the vein of how much support I've heard across the board, not directly from DSA on the concept necessarily, but from transit activists, from urbanists, from folks who are also, as Lehigh noted today, looking for greater safety and security for their members as well, who might be residents in the area. So I think there's broad support, as there has been for a long time, in activating 3rd Avenue and really thinking about a pedestrian, cyclist, transit commuter friendly corridor. So I'm excited to see us do that here, but also would love to see the concept continue to be evolved over or expanded throughout our city. I do have to ask a few specific questions though, Mr. Chair. perhaps of the department, perhaps of central staff, but I'm going to harken back to the vision PDF that was shared alongside of the document here that got us going, called A Road of Possibilities. On page 24 of the strategies, it says strategies for private property and retail. Starting on page 25, it says, let's think about how we blur the lines between public and private life. Public life does not stop at a property line. Flex the line between public and private life where possible to spill life out of the buildings and into the streets. Reconsider the use of privately owned public spaces and explore partnerships for improved design and activation. And then on page 37, it says the street environment won't change overnight. The public sector must harness private sector investments occurring at key nodes along the street and partner with intersecting civic projects. This sounds like it could be a reference to our street cafes, which I think are beloved by council members and residents across the city. I think that the concern to me would be if we're talking about ensuring that we are maintaining public space, if we're maintaining the public in public spaces, or are places like our sidewalks going to be allowed to be privatized or sold to the private market. So I have a question about how the recommendations really fold into our vision of maintaining the public in public spaces. I just want to make sure that we're not like starting to creep into an area where there would be a potential for increased arrest or citations for trespassing if we're talking about blurring the lines. Can you talk a little bit, maybe from the mayor's office or from central staff, about how we really maintain sidewalks, how we ensure that those are being maintained in public hands, and how we would be more protecting against any sort of blurring of the lines also being used for justification for arresting or trespassing or issuing trespassing citations?
Really good question, multifaceted. So I'll start with this work would be happening in close partnership with our Office of Planning and Community Development, because once you really start getting into that realm between the street right of way and the private space, I think it's looking at how we design, and especially as we think about new developments along the corridor, how are they designed with public benefit in mind? So their partnership would be imperative in this work. And I think kind of the question then about where do sort of public safety, how does that fall into it as well, is kind of like the next level of once you get design, how do you ensure they're safe and accessible for everybody? They're good questions that would have to be addressed, talked about with community, and resolved as we work through the design process itself. Because I think until you have kind of a proposal to put out there and say, this is what we're considering, and this is how we would create that space between public and private, and here's how it would look and feel, it's difficult to answer those questions beforehand, or at this point in time anyway. But they're good questions to be asking.
I would add that I think there's a focus on activation of public space and sort of blurring the lines in terms of perspective of how it's being used and what type of access is there. But fundamentally, it will be public right of way that will be managed by SDOT, and SDOT will have permitting authority. That we are talking in Transportation Committee about street cafes, for example, and what that authority looks like. It's revocable. It's not permanent. They would have to vacate the streets to be able to turn it into private ownership. So from a purely legalized standpoint, it would remain city right of way, and it's a question of how we agree it should be used and potentially permitted for other uses if that is something that can be accommodated. These are going to be the most valuable, this is among the most crowded usable public space in downtown. That's part of the reason for this whole initiative. So I have every expectation that SDOT would take that into consideration as any of these types of private proposals came forward for permitted activity in the right of way. But it would be right of way. It would not be private property.
I'll just add to that. I think the expansion though, it's if the street is redesigned and reconfigured in a different way, but still all of the buildings backs face Third Avenue, or the lobbies are underutilized like it's highlighted in the report, you're still gonna, you've made one improvement, but you have to think of the entire ecosystem. And that's sort of my point around involving OPCD and some of our other departments in this work. That would be transportation, maybe focused and led initially, but it's a larger conversation. So like I said, good questions to be asking, and things that would get resolved over the next few months and years.
And I'd be remiss if I didn't sort of point to the DSA's own, speaking points about this, where they are talking about how does the private realm kind of intersect with this too, because I think on the city side, we do think about the city right away because that's what we control. But I think, behind this is exactly what Elliot was saying, is what does that interface look like, and how do you kind of encourage that interaction between the private property and the public right of way as well.
Yeah, just as a last piece of context, I think it is a good question for us to grapple with. I don't think that the DSA was phrasing those concepts in a way to indicate a private encroachment on acquiring the ownership or use of the public sphere. I think it was more to line up a discussion about how to sync the ingress and egress of private properties with the public sphere in a way that enhances activation and enhances the urban environment on Third Avenue. And we have lots of good examples of those kinds of partnerships. It's sort of evocative of the discussion we've had over the last 2 years about diversifying storefront uses in the downtown core, that historically that's been restricted almost exclusively to retail, and the interest of the Downtown Seattle Association in diversifying storefront use, where there's connotations with increased activation, like, art galleries or like gyms or Pilates studios, things that historically you would not be able to put at street level because we made planning decisions several decades ago that assumed you would only go downtown for office or retail. And of course, we know that is not the case. It's a dynamic neighborhood that needs a strong diversity of uses to thrive. So it's a good line of questioning that we need to incorporate into our planning. And as Elliot said, speaks to the need to include OPCD as one of the departments that really looks into this. Councilmember Mosqueda, I believe you have more questions, so you still have the floor.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Thanks all for that answer. That clarification is very helpful. And I think just to make sure that we're, stating for the public record our interest in doing this collaboratively, but maintaining the public and public space and activating the space that's really a true public benefit for all is helpful to lift up as one of our core principles, as Councilmember Morales was asking about going into this. So I just want to make sure that that's part of the public record as we think about how space is activated in the future. And perhaps my last question has merged more into a comment or a statement. I think in response to one of Councilmember Morales's questions, you talked about the broad stakeholder group that would be brought together with transit activists and folks maybe who represent folks from the disability community, or folks who are advocating with those who are currently unhoused and small businesses to activate storefronts, along with partners at DSA and the city. So it sounds like there's going to be a broader conversation to be pulled together on implementation to realize the resolution here. I just want to make sure, and if you have any comments about this right now, that'd be great. But there's a line that talks about identifying short-term changes that can improve the pedestrian environment along Third Avenue. Everybody, I think, has that shared goal. I think we also want to make sure that it's not taken out of context or too vague to allow some to construe it to mean removing anything in the way, including benches or bus stops. That would be counter to what I think the initial goal was, which was activating more places for people to use transit and encouraging transit use. I also want to make sure that it's not being used in a way to remove individuals who really ought to be able to get into shelters and have an affordable place and healthy place to call home. So is the concept to have a broad coalition that really makes sure that we have shared principles about what it means to activate the space and improve the pedestrian environment along Third Avenue, so that there's not maybe a misunderstanding or an application of that language that would be counter to our goals of promoting bus rider utilization and wanting to prevent individuals from being seen as problematic on that street, when really what we want to do is get more folks into shelter and housing.
I would just add, from the transportation perspective and why that line is so important in there, is a lot of the concept ideas involve potential lane reductions. So it's important for us to study what that might be. And so we're piloting a few areas on 3rd now to see if you can maintain capacity while reducing the amount of lanes. So some of those quick wins are also to inform what could work along the entire corridor. That's what that line is in there. And if there are more sort of short-term wins that we can do while we have a larger discussion about the corridor and what it looks like, that could help inform it, is what that's meant to include.
The other piece of context I would add to that too, like more broadly to some of the systemic concerns Councilmember Mosqueda raised, which I really think underline the point of me bringing this resolution forward, is activating spaces requires careful planning. It requires programming. It requires collaboration. It requires stakeholdering to place make areas people want to be in, want to spend their time in, want to live in, that are desirable. The course of destroying public amenities or installing hostile architecture because we fail to plan, fail to grapple with the challenges that we have in our city environment, and make reactive decisions in a sudden, unthinking, and frightened way, because we do not have the confidence as a city that we can build and maintain livable and desirable places, is what we need to avoid. And you can only avoid that with planning. It is the steady destruction of the public sphere because of a broad-based skepticism and cynicism that can even pervade government itself, in saying, this problem can never be fixed, so the public just shouldn't have nice things. And if you don't have the money or amenity in a community, we're not going to create a good urban environment for you to live in. And by putting forward planning principles like this, we can avoid situations where looking at the public sphere and trying to make it safer is a situation where you try to make things uncomfortable, or you try to remove public amenities entirely. And we've had a lot of good examples recently in Seattle of that being a way that previous administrations decided to react to issues that were in our public sphere, instead of challenging us to be better and planning and investing in a way that makes the city we all want to live in. So setting up planning like this around areas that have historically been problematic, to figure out how we make them thrive, and how we let everyone there succeed, and how we let, like I said earlier, the housing for the that the Low Income Housing Institute has operated at this location in Bellwether, making sure the people that live in these locations have the same amenities that historically more invested neighborhoods have always had, is the way we should be approaching this work, instead of being reactionary and deciding, they can't destroy a park if we put a fence around it, is something we have to avoid at all costs. And that's why queuing up things like this, work product like this, it helps us move along. So I just wanted to share that as well, because I think Councilmember Mosqueda's question is exactly on point. We want to create urban, livable, activated spaces. And I hope that this resolution will be a vehicle to do that.
Well said, Councilmember Lewis. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And that is the summary of my questions. Appreciate the conversation today, and that this issue is being resurfaced again.
Councilmember Morales.
Councilmember, your mic is muted.
Thank you. It's only been 3 years on Zoom. I just want to thank you, Mr. Chair, as the only planner on council. I can say that your understanding of these principles is really important, and I couldn't agree more that we have to approach projects like this without cynicism or skepticism about, how we can move forward. I think it is entirely possible to move forward in a way that brings prosperity to the urban landscape, that brings more joy back to downtown, and that is still in line and keeping with our principles around equity and inclusion, and look forward to continuing the conversation with those goals in mind.
Thank you, Councilmember Morales. I could give shorter speeches, but sometimes I get too lazy to stop. So with that, I don't see any additional questions or context or commentary from anyone on the panel. So I would like to go ahead and call the question on this. So I'm going to go ahead and move that we pass the amended resolution before us, which is resolution 32067. Is there a second? Okay, moved and seconded. Will the clerk please call the roll on the resolution?
Councilmember Herbold,
Yes.
Councilmember Morales,
Yes.
Vice Chair Mosqueda,
Aye.
Chair Lewis.
Yes.
Chair, there are 4 votes in favor, none opposed.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Given the vote, this will go to the full council meeting that Council President determines it should be considered at, hopefully next Tuesday. And appreciate the discussion that we had this afternoon. That is the last item on the agenda, and there's no further business to come before the council. It is 2:57 p.m. and I am going to go ahead and say we are adjourned. Thank you.